Hello fellow Seraph fans, and welcome to the Guren video. It's been a long time coming, but I finally got off my ass and bought all of Guren's currently translated into English light novels. I'm Ash, I make some Seraph videos, I make some game design videos, I basically just do whatever I want. Artist, writer, games designer, I do too much and it's constantly weighing on me, but today, all I had to do was read some novels and it was lit. I wanted to make a video covering all of the events that happen in these books, because obviously not everyone has access to them or the time to read through them all. So that's where this video comes in. I'm summarizing everything that happens in each book of this series. This video will be about the finished series Catastrophe at 16, which are the events that happen before the virus kills all of the adults. The sequel novels that are still currently in production, Resurrection at 19, they're still being made, so they'll come in a future video, or in like separate parts, depending on how much I feel like everyone needs to know the current events. I'm assuming most people going into this will be familiar with either the anime or be reading the manga. So you'll be used to Yu and Mika's story, but only have mentions and small flashbacks of the past events. Guren talks a lot about what happened to them all when they were 16 and when the world ended, but the light novels go into way more depth and show how things progressed up until that point. A note with the covers too, in the English, most of the books collect two of the Japanese books into one volume in English. So these are the covers for all of the English volumes, but these are the covers for the Japanese books. As I mention the books as we go, I'll be using the Japanese covers for reference, since it helps distinguish them more. But if you choose to buy the English ones and read them yourself, just note that they're published a little differently. Okay, moving on. So without further ado, I'm Ash, and I read Guren Ichinose Catastrophe at 16, so you didn't have to. Book 1, I'm Not Like the Other Guys. Book 1 begins with a 5-year-old Guren and Mahiru together, laughing and playing. Before long, Mahiru is ripped away from him by the Hiragi family, and Guren is bashed for daring to be so close to a Hiragi. Guren wishes he had the power to protect her, but is powerless as Mahiru is taken from him. It would be 10 years before he would see Mahiru Hiragi again. Chapter 1, we're introduced to a young 15-year-old Guren and his two bodyguards, Sayuri and Shigure. They're all on their way to Shibuya First High School, which I'll just call Shibuya High from now on. Before they can reach the classroom, someone throws a bottle of cola at Guren among a sea of whispers of the Ichinose mongrel they're letting into the prestigious school. Guren is a lot stronger than he appears, he's incredibly well trained and he knows he can dodge the bottle easily, but he lets it fall to appear weak. He wants everyone to think he's a meek, lower-class loser so they won't get suspicious of his family or the plotting to overthrow the Hiragis they have been training for so long. Guren has an appearance to keep up, and only Shigure and Sayuri, his bodyguards from retainer houses of the Ichinoses, know about his true strength. At the school gates, he encounters Shinya Hiragi for the first time, who immediately tests him by launching a Fuda magic scroll at him. Guren knows he can dodge, but he obviously doesn't, acting weak instead. Shinya walks away without a word, and the gang then steps into the school ground to begin their first day at Shibuya High. Chapter 2, classroom introductions happen. The teacher is a Hiragi lapdog and rudely mocks Guren in front of everyone else. Surprise, surprise. Sayuri and Shigure are sent to different classes on purpose to separate them from Guren and leave him alone. Shinya rocks up into the class, sitting his ass right down next to Guren. He begins running his mouth off, but mentions two interesting details. 1, he is an adopted Hiragi, not of the direct family line, and 2, he hates the Hiragis as much as Guren does. He prattles on about them becoming friends, which Guren is having none of right now. Then they're all summoned to the auditorium to hear a speech from the top of their school, Mahiru Hiragi. Time for a reunion. Chapter 3. Mito Jujo approaches Guren to ask what he and Shinya were whispering about in class. Guren avoids the question and causes Mito to grow annoyed and irritated with Guren, cussing him out before Mahiru arrives to take the stage, demanding silence from all. He does glean an interesting detail from Mito, though. Shinya is Mahiru's fiancé, engaged to be next top dogs of the Hiragi clan. Back at home that night, the three Ichinose gang are settling down and Guren leaves to do some training on the gym floor arranged above them. When he reaches the elevator, it opens to reveal someone inside, going up also. When they reach Guren's training floor, he quickly realizes this is someone sent to attack him. They fight, with Guren jumping out of the elevator to take the battle to the hallway. He soon finds out this person, this man in a black suit, fights with chains coming out of his body and uses spell scrolls that aren't Hiragi magic. After they exchange blows, the assassin reveals he works for an order known as the Thousand Knights, one that stands in direct opposition to the Hiragis and their Imperial Demon Order. The assassin identifies himself as Makoto Kijima, but we know him very well by another name which will be revealed very soon. The Thousand Knights have no qualms about human experimentation, as evident with Makoto's chimera-like body, which is what they call humans experimented on. He extends an offer to Guren to join them in the fight against the Hiragis. Guren declines, and the assassin leaves. Chapter 4. We're back at school. They're training with some fights, and Shinya goes up against Guren, who has obviously been faking losing this whole time. Shinya doesn't hold back, however, and punches Guren square in the chest, forcing him to cough up blood. He loses consciousness after this, and Mito and Narito express genuine concern over him for the first time. Guren awakes in the nurse's office and immediately does the very responsible thing of beginning to take off his bandages. What a champion. Mahiru slides in and they have a reunion at last. Side note, how is you and Mika's 4 years apart reunion way more desperate and passionate than Mahiru and Guren after 10 years? Really says a lot about the characters, I'd say. But anyway, Guren acts meek and submissive, and Mahiru noticeably hates this. She says she came over because she heard he had been injured. She obviously still loves him very much, and Guren notes this too. She ends up leaving, sounding disappointed in his lack of dialogue and reaction. Chapter 5. Shinya mocks Guren for not being able to dodge his attack. Narito wants to be introduced to Guren's quote-unquote hotties that guard him. Mito makes comments about him being a pervert, and Guren starts to wonder why these two are suddenly being way friendlier with him, a dirty Ichinose mongrel. Out in the hallways, Guren and his entourage run into Seshiro, another Hiragi. He's incredibly aggressive and full of himself and wastes no time showing it to Guren. Shinya steps in to block the Guren gang from Seshiro's attack and expresses how he expected so much more from Guren. He had suspected that Guren was hiding his true strength, but he says he can see now that he was wrong and the Ichinoses really are just that weak. Points to Guren for his acting, I guess. Later that night, Guren is waiting outside a supermarket for Sayuri and Shigure to finish shopping inside. He notices a child and adult standing nearby, a very familiar adult to him, and a familiar child to us. It's the assassin from the elevator, Makoto, or as he now wants Guren to call him by, Saito. An orphanage is mentioned, and Saito calls the child by name. It's Mikaela, age 8, from the Hyakuya orphanage. Saito sends young Mika inside and stops to talk with Guren. Guren is clued on enough to guess what would be happening, and Saito doesn't deny anything. He tries again to get Guren to join the Thousand Knights organization. He mentions how a virus will be spreading and how the trumpets of the apocalypse will soon be sound, and that it will be all the Hiragi's fault, and the Thousand Knights were trying to stop them. Guren refuses the offer, once more basically telling Saito to fuck off. Saito warns that a war between the two clans is starting very soon, and if he changes his mind, to reach him at the Hyakuya orphanage. Mika comes back then, and Saito takes him away. Later, Guren writes a letter to let everyone back home know the Imperial Moon Order, the one the Ichinoses run, of the Thousand Knights, and the possibility of war breaking out. Great fun. Chapter 6. The qualifying exams are held. If they fail these, they will be expelled from the school. Shock gasp. Mito and Shigure have a good match that makes Mito start to respect Shigure's power more, and laments how she serves such a weak person like a Guren. Ever since Shinya had expressed his disappointment in Guren, Narito and Mito have begun to drift away too. Afterwards, Sayuri is fighting Seshiro, who is holding nothing back. She's getting destroyed, and no one is stopping the fight. Guren is about to step in to protect her, but Mahiru shows up to stop Seshiro instead, forcing Guren back down from potentially releasing his secret. She manages to get Seshiro not to kill the teenager, and Guren takes Sayuri to the hospital. The next day, Guren is pitted against Seshiro. Shinya suggests he forfeits, since he's clearly no match for him, and Guren agrees, much to Shinya's disgust. Everyone is yelling at him, calling him a coward, and then Guren senses something wrong, something coming at them from the sky. He pushes Narito and Mito out of the way from nearby, and just where they had been standing, a laser-like beam of light hits the ground. Immediately, the grounds erupt into chaos. From the sky, men in black suits, members of the Thousand Knights, descend onto the school grounds. Immediately, students begin fighting and being killed by the much stronger opponents. Saito shows up, about to kill Seshiro, when Guren steps in to knock him out of the way. He starts fighting at full power and realizes that Shinya is behind him, a prime witness to his strength. Now Shinya knows the truth, and Guren asks him again if he wants to take down the Hiragis. Shinya's resolve stays firm, and they begin to attack Saito together. They manage to subdue him and begin interrogating right away. They learn that someone in the school has been betraying the Hiragis and selling their secrets to the Thousand Knights. Shinra realizes first, and Guren soon after. It's Mahiru. And now here she is, to fully betray them in the open and leave with the Thousand Knights. In her hand is an obsidian blade, the results of their experiments so far. She sounds cocky, so sure of herself, and far more powerful than any of them. But cracks start to appear, and soon her speech is broken as she begins to almost argue with herself over demon possession. Saito jumps in before anything else can happen, but before they leave, Mahiru gives one last plea for Guren to go with them. He refuses. She reveals the truth of Saito's words he said that day in front of the supermarket. The world will end this year, come Christmas. They had less than a year left until the world was annihilated. The 1,000 knights take off, leaving behind a bloody field and screaming survivors. Shinya and Guren stare at each other, wondering what will happen next. The war had started. The epilogue ends with Guren and his gang walking to school, and once again a cola bottle is thrown at him. He lets it hit, but this time, there's 2 new people there to join him, Mito and Norito, joking and hanging out alongside Sayuri and Shigure. Book 2, it's time for my daily angst, guys, leave me alone. The prologue begins with a 5-year-old Sayuri back in the Aichi Mountains, the Ichinose stronghold. Guren is back there after being beaten up in front of Mahiru, and Sayuri comments on how she must get stronger to protect her master Guren, as any normal 5-year-old does, you know. She silently admits how her love for him has grown over the years, but understands how Guren has a love of his own, and is content to watch from beside him as his guardian. Chapter 1. Guren and Mito are out on the training grounds fighting. Guren throws the match. What a surprise. Mito gets angry and Norito scolds him for egging her on. They didn't see Guren exercise his true strength back in the exams attack before, so their perception of him is still mixed. They did, however, feel gratitude to him for saving their lives from the blast. Shinya catches up to him and alerts him to the fact he's being monitored. Far above in the school building, Kurito Hiragi is watching, the school president, and the biggest, baddest Hiragi around right now. Chapter 2. Guren is walking with his retainers home. He warns them they're being watched and to act natural. Then he peels off to slip off in the direction of the Hyakuya orphanage. Walking down the street, he runs into little 8-year-old Shinoa Hiragi. She's been sent by Mahiru and warns him not to make contact with the 1,000 Knights, and that her sister plans to betray them too. Absolute shocker. He warns her that he doesn't like being manipulated by anyone and to deliver that message to Mahiru. Then, from a nearby park, he notices little Mikhaila out playing with the other kids from the orphanage. Mika also notices Guren and runs up to see if Shinoa is okay. Since Saito had jokingly called Guren a pervert before, Shinoa lays on the act thick, pretending he did say naughty things, and Guren leaves thoroughly annoyed with the 2 of them. Chapter 3. Guren and the others from his class are summoned for evaluations at the gymnasium. Surprise, surprise, it's not the usual kind. Kurito is behind these ones, and he decides to test Guren's strength here in person. He makes Shinya and Guren fight first, and Shinya throws his punch, which Kurito notices. He then draws his blade and turns to fight Guren head-on. Guren, having no intention of dying, finally reveals his true strength here. He dodges and fights Kurito, and finally admits he's stronger than he's let on. Norito and Mito are shocked in the background. Kurito expresses wanting to see which one of them is stronger, but then when they begin the fair fight, 4 assailants under Kurito's orders tranquilize Guren and knock him out. Chapter 4. Guren wakes up in a basement to the wonderful torturing from the Hiragis. He manages to keep his cool, doesn't reveal more than he wants to, and Kurito eventually stops, satisfied. He makes Guren his right-hand man and forces him into becoming one of his retainers. Guren can't refuse, of course, because Kurito has the power to wipe out his entire clan and the Imperial Moon clan if he wants. Outside, he runs into Mito, who is very annoyed at how much Guren had been hiding his strength. She thinks he's been mocking them all this time, and she can't wrap her head around why he would prefer to hide and be meek than to own his own strength. Norito gives him a similar interrogation, and Guren wonders why he saved them in the first place, when it would have been so much easier on him to let them die. But he finds out he doesn't know why, but he just did. But he also knows Mahiru wouldn't. She would have sacrificed them both in a heartbeat. Chapter 5. Guren is in his apartment with Sayuri and Shigure. He receives intel from back home that the 1,000 Knights have been trying to contain the story, and that it was going to break out on the news soon. At 6 in the morning, they announced that something had killed off all the animals at the Ueno Zoo. It's under wraps right now, but the 1,000 Knights are responsible somehow. He plans to go investigate, but a call from Kurito stops him. Kurito wants him to show up at the student council office. He has a job for them. At school, Guren runs into Seshiro at the gate. Seshiro tries to grab him and make a show of power, but Guren easily beats him. Then, instead of just moving on like normal, he decides to mess with Seshiro a bit. He leans in so only Seshiro can hear and pretends that he's on a secret spying mission for the head of the Hiragi clan, Kirito and Seshiro's father, Tenri. He says they're spying on Kirito and that he's a suspect in the 1,000 Knight attack. He fakes it all, but Seshiro is an idiot and believes him in seconds. Guren can barely contain himself from laughing, and honestly, same. It's June, Guren notes. They have half a year left until the world ends. Chapter 6. The squad gathers. Guren and the gang are all summoned to Kurito's office, where Kurito has a mission for the new squad. Guren mentions the topic of the news before, the animal slaughter in the Ueno Park Zoo. He has intel that says the Thousand Knights are behind it, and all his previous squads he sent have been wiped out. He selects Guren to lead the team and sends them off. He gives Guren a replacement sword, but it's not very important since it's not a demon sword, so who cares? Guren tests the others' abilities to get a sense of their power levels, and the team starts to form. It's time to go to war. Chapter 7. They arrive at Ueno Park. They head to the zoo where they find none of the animals, but the area is deadly quiet. Inside one of the exhibits there is a lone tiger. But something isn't quite right. It's huge for one and covered in bloodstains. And also in its mouth is a blade instead of a tongue. You know, normal tiger things. It attacks the gang and Guren is quick to react first. He jumps in with his sword while Shinya backs him up and he manages to slice the head off of the tiger. Instead of blood, however, something else emerges from the tiger's corpse. A white, synthetic-looking creature skidding around on a pile of legs. It stands much taller than the tiger, and Guren marvels at how it even managed to fit in the tiger to begin with. A side note, but it's basically implied this creature is meant to at least look like one of the Four Horsemen of John, if not actually an experimental one. Norito uses his illusions to buy them time to plan, and while everyone else wants to flee with the information, Guren decides he wants to kill the creature and bring it back to the Ichinose clan, to prove he has the power to keep up with Mahiru and her wild ambitions. He even entertains the thought of killing Norito and Mito, and blame their deaths on the creature to cover himself. Eventually, though, he realizes he doesn't have the resolve to be as cruel as Mahiru, and he gives in, ordering the retreat for everyone. And then Mahiru rocks up to knock everyone else out, leaving her alone to confront Guren. They have basically a lover's spat, and Mahiru says how disappointed she is he hasn't sunk to the same level of madness as her. Like, okay girl, chill mate. Mahiru pulls out her obsidian sword, thrusting it into the ground between them. It's a cursed blade, and Guren can feel the demon living within it, even from the distance he was. Just then, the chimera creature in the background has broken from Norito's illusions, and comes charging towards them. Mahiru mocks Guren for not being able to save everyone, unless he draws the sword. Guren can feel it calling to him, and he realizes he has no choice. He draws the sword, and in one strike carves the beast in two. With the danger gone, the blade and demon inside immediately begin to take over Guren's mind. He can feel it seeping up his arm from the blade, and so, he cuts off his arm. Mahiru shows genuine surprise at his actions and races to shove the stump back into the cut-off limb. She says the regenerative power of the demon inside might still be flowing inside him, and sure enough, his limb begins to reattach itself. Guren begs her to stay, to stop researching cursed gear. She shakes her head, saying how powerless he is to stop it. What can he do? He says he'll try and find a way. She takes the sword, and mentions how a piece of the demon has already tainted his soul now. She swoops in to take one half of the chimera's corpse, and they both realize another person is there. Someone with long, silver hair and blood-red eyes. It's Ferret! Oh shit! He's taking the other half of the corpse, commenting on how far human demonology has come and how scary it is. Mahiru begins to fight him, but it's obvious Ferret is more powerful. Guren rushes forward to defend Mahiru from a fatal strike, and Ferret's blow shatters the bones in his arm. Then he just leaves with half the corpse, because he's Ferret and he doesn't really care that much. Mahiru was about to leave herself when, plot twist! Shinya faked getting knocked down and was eavesdropping the whole time! He's trying to contain Mahiru with Fuda spells, and he and Guren are about to wreck her, but damn, she's just too sneaky, and she escapes. Guren manages to slice a piece of the chimera corpse, however, to take back to the Ichinoses for study. The others wake up and Guren decides to play tag team with them and pass out instead. In the epilogue, Guren wakes up in the Aichi Mountains, miles away from Tokyo. His retainers, Sayuri and Shigure, have brought him back to the Ichinose clan's home to recover. It took him a month, and now that he's awake and well enough, he returns to Tokyo to school. Shinya and the others are there to greet him, and Guren replies in a very Guren way, with a quick insult and a snappy response. It's mid-July, and time is creeping up on them until the apocalypse. Book 3. Love is Stored in the Sword. The prologue gives us a look at little 5-year-old Shinya's first meeting with Mahiru. It reveals how he's had to kill other prospective husbands that Hiragis were testing, and how Shinya had to grow up in an environment of being on top or being dead. Mahiru gets right to the point. She doesn't care about him, she's still in love with Guren. Shinya agrees to be her shield and cover as a fake fiancé for her. This is the first time he learns of Guren Ichinose, and the seed of jealousy has already been planted for how he would attack him on arrival to the school in the first book. Chapter 1. Guren is in the Aichi Mountains hideout. The scientists there are trying to experiment on and study the piece of the chimera Guren took at the end of Book 2's fight. They aren't getting fast and good enough results, so human experimentation is suggested, to which Guren says, fuck off. The lead scientist injects herself with his blood, intent to find results, and the arm begins to mutate into its own monstrous form, a demon. Guren slices it off and then fights a deformed hand, which comments on how Guren is also a demon, with his demonic blood infection. He tells the scientists to continue studying the chimera pieces and his tainted blood, and then leaves for Shibuya High with Shigure and Sayuri. Chapter 2. Guren walks into school to a different kind of whispering about him. This time, people are shocked and in somewhat awe, now that he is a retainer directly serving under Kurito Hiragi. In class, Mito takes it upon herself to start trying to educate Guren into paying more attention. It doesn't go well, surprise surprise. After she gives up the lectures on being comrades and working together, Shinya slides over to discuss their next move. The Thousand Knights want to meet, and they've selected a park at night to do it in. Upon leaving the classroom, Guren gets a phone call. Kirito tells him to come to the student council office at lunch tomorrow. Guren replies snarkily as usual, and Kirito blushes over how much he loves Guren's shitty lax attitude and how Guren can't do shit to him. Seriously, Kirito has such a weird view on Guren in this book, it's almost impossible to not make blushing school crush comparisons. Mito and Norito get the fantastic idea to do team building by all going over to Guren's place. The entire gang moseys over. Shigure and Sayuri go get ingredients for food, and the others all wander over to Guren's place, which he's very thrilled about. Chapter 3. The news on TV shows an apartment complex on fire, while the gang is sitting around Guren's lounge room playing shogi. They turn to watch the news as a woman in the crowd starts screaming, getting restrained by the firefighters around. She starts screaming an all too familiar name, and we instantly know who she is. Yuichiro's mother. At first, the scene is set up like she's worried that he's still inside and may be burning, but that quickly changes when she starts screaming about what a demon he is and how, "That boy is a demon! I have to kill him!" She then proceeds to pour gasoline all over herself and light herself on fire. At this point in the timeline, Yu is 8, just like Mika. What a lovely parent. Then Guren recognizes a face on the screen, just before the camera's cut. Saito. Of course. He ruminates on how the Thousand Knights sect is probably behind something there and working to cover it up immediately, and then whatever it is happened unexpectedly, otherwise they would have squashed it before cameras got there. The gang comments on how weird and unsettling it all was. Mito sucks at shogi, Guren throws his match against Norito, and the 3 others begin to leave. Shinya purposely leaves his phone behind, allowing him and Guren a moment without Mito and Norito to discuss their plans of attack for the meeting with the Thousand Knights. The scene cuts to 1:30 AM, with Guren rocking up in the park on a stolen motorbike. Get used to that, it's going to happen more than you think. Shinya also does the same thing, makes a hearty chuckle and comments on how they both had the exact same idea. They climb trees and make trap spells around it to get into position to do recon. They see the black-suited men at the tennis courts in the distance, the meeting place. But then suddenly, things go wrong, and someone else shows up to start attacking the Thousand Knights. Guren notices the person stop to lean in and bite one of the black suits, and realizes it's a vampire. Luck is not on their side, as she turns to them and immediately starts running at them. They jump down onto the bikes, and before Guren has a chance to rev it up past a few feet, the vampire grabs the front wheel, stopping it in a flash. Shinya rides up behind him, grabs his hand, and yanks him away before the vampire can slice Guren open. On the back of the bike, Guren makes a lucky strike, cutting off the vampire's arm, which makes her stop chasing them. They manage to ride away and escape. They split up to return to their homes, and upon arrival, Guren is assaulted by Shigure and Sayuri in their pajamas and in tears, hugging him desperately. Guren tries to brush them off, warn them about being too close to his blood once more, but even he relents when he sees how much they feared for his life that night. Chapter 4. Here we go. The next day in the classroom, they play shogi again. Mito comments on how she's never really been over someone else's house before, and she really enjoyed it. Shinya and Guren have a mini power tournament to decide who is the best at the game they've both barely played before. Guren wins by 1, and the bell for lunch saves him from playing anymore. He's off to see Kurito. At the student council office, Aoi Sangu takes him down to the basements, where he was previously tortured. She mentions how someone else is being tortured right now, Mahiru's younger sister, Shinoa. Guren walks into a scene of Shinoa's limbs covered in blood, and it looks like all her nails have been ripped out. She's smiling though, showing off the Hiragi resistance. Kurito starts interrogating Guren about Mahiru, trying to squeeze out any means and communications they may have. He mentions how Mahiru didn't care about Shinoa's potential execution, and that she sent an email saying, "Do as you wish," to Kurito. Guren keeps his cool, and Kurito says he trusts him, but then makes a move to kill Shinoa. Guren intervenes, and Kurito passes him of the test. He then reveals how Shinoa is totally fine, and he just gave her very convincing makeup to try and pick at Guren. Shinoa said nothing of their past encounter, and they both managed to pretend they had never met. Kirito makes Guren message Mahiru's email, who then, knowing Guren's number somehow, rings him straight back and they have a discussion. She then talks to Shinoa, checking in on her, and then Kirito talking about betrayal, the family, and making accusations of each other. They then find out that Mahiru has been broadcasting her and Kirito's whole conversation school-wide, and everyone heard everything. Kirito leaves to prepare for the upcoming trouble, and outside, Guren and Shinoa see Shinya. They talk about the situation, then Shinya goes off to get Shinoa a ride home. Meanwhile, Guren takes a call from Mahiru. Her voice is slow and distant. It's obvious she's fighting to stay in control. She talks about how she almost can't take over the demon anymore, and its bouts of possession are getting stronger and longer. Soon, she thinks she won't be able to stop it. She begs Guren to kill her when the inevitable happens, but he says, "Fuck it, I'm going to save you," like Guren does. He gets her address at a meeting time and books his ass over to where she supposedly is. That night, he leaves to meet Mahiru. Inside her apartment, he finds a test log from the experiments they had been running on the cursed gear, records of people dying and of how Mahiru had been experimenting on herself. Guren, understandably, is like, "What? Damn, that's intense," but in a more Guren way, of course. Mahiru shows up, but it's the demon at first. Mahiru herself manages to push through to talk to Guren. They embrace, and Guren tries to reassure her she isn't alone, and that he will save her. She says it's impossible, the demon is in too deep, and it's already too late for her. Then she makes a last request, for them to have a very Christian time together on top of the same bed playing cards, which makes her very happy. Afterwards, the demon comes out, gloating about how it's totally in control now. Just then, bam, through the window comes the vampire from before. The one who had been attacking the 1,000 Knights in the park. She says, "I finally found you, Mahiru Hiragi." And just when you think this can't get any more intense, Mahiru pulls out a sword and says one very familiar name, Ashimaru. She slices the vampire in half and she dissolves into ashes. Mahiru escapes out the window, leaving Guren all alone. Outside, everything is intense. The 1,000 Knights and Imperial demons are fighting everywhere. Guren gets a call from Mito, who is short on breath and back at the school. She says they can't hold out much longer, and thanks him for such a fun time in his house. He freaks out, telling her to hold on until he arrives, and then the line goes dead. Shigure and Sayuri aren't responding either. He leaves the apartment complex and heads outside. In a nearby alleyway, there sits a motorbike with the keys in the ignition, and beside it, the black sword Mahiru had wielded it back in Book 2, in the Chimera fight. The one Guren had picked up, the one that had cursed his blood. He knows what this means. Give up his humanity to save his friends. Give it up, give in to the demon. He doesn't have a choice. Guren reaches for the demon sword, and then, darkness. Book 4, Guren goes apeshit. The prologue gives us a view into Guren's thoughts as he reaches for the sword. He realizes how all his goals and dreams aren't going to become a reality. He's too weak to protect anyone, and he'll be destined to watch everyone die while he's powerless. Chapter 1. Guren meets a demon in his sword. He comes face to face with a little boy with two horns protruding from a sea of crimson hair. It's Noya, if you remember him from the manga. The demon taunts him for not having enough power, but offers his own, saying Guren will be able to save everyone if he accepts Noya. "Want it, Guren," he says. "Want my power." Guren reaches forward to wrap his hands around Noya's throat. At the connection, they are now joined. Noya laughs. "Wrong choice, Guren. Don't you know humans shouldn't give up their humanity?" But it's too late. The choice is made, and the demon now lives inside Guren. Struggling with the new overflow of emotions and feelings, Guren gets on the waiting motorbike and speeds off to save his friends. Chapter 2. Shinya kills the man. He's in Shibuya Crossing when the 1,000 Knights' black suits show up, coming after him. Forced to attack, Shinya fights them in the middle of the busy square. He manages to escape through the crowds of chaos, making a call to Kirito as he does. Kirito confirms that war has broken out and sends Shinya over to the school to command troops to fight the 1,000 Knights attacking the school. The next few scenes happen from different characters' point of views, at roughly the same time. Mito is in the AV room at school, struggling to keep the door barred from the 1,000 Knights soldiers outside. The other students locked inside aren't being any help, and Mito laments not being strong enough, and now her life is going to end, and she never got to do anything fun with it. She regrets not going out more and just having fun. She is a teenager after all, and she thinks on how she had the best time at Guren's little impromptu party. The soldiers finally break through, and she weakly calls to Guren for help. Meanwhile, Naruto is hiding in the girls' bathroom, hiding his location by making an illusion of the door to keep the soldiers away. Like Mito, his mind wanders to his past regrets. His younger brother is the family favourite, set to inherit the head clan position, despite how Naruto is the oldest. He's always felt like a bit of a failure, and the chance Kirito gave him to be part of the squad made him believe he might be worth something finally. But then, everything went to shit, and here he is crouching in a toilet stall, waiting for his end, which comes fairly soon as he's found and quickly stabbed by 1,000 Knights men. Meanwhile, on the roof, Shigure and Sayuri are being held down by a bunch of Thousand Knight soldiers. Shigure is restrained while the others are attempting to not do very nice things to Sayuri. Side note, I refuse to go into all of the weird, clearly written by a man details that are in these light novels when it comes to the women, but it is important to note that they are there. I just don't consider them details, and they're all very gross, and they all involve the R word, which I am not going to say, so I see absolutely no point in mentioning them because they're disgusting and they're not crucial to the plot. Moving on. Saito is just there watching like the creep he is. Guren rocks up, much to Saito's glee, and begins to start murdering everyone, attacking the two girls. Saito exclaims how pleased he is with Guren's transformation and abandoning his humanity. He's hiding safely in the distance, on a school fence watching, right next to Mahiru. She more or less says the same thing as Saito, and jabs at Guren a little. She's placed a kind of spell around the school that brings everyone's desires and emotions up to the surface, feeding into them more. She taunts Shigure and Sayuri for not being able to admit their love for Guren, some more garbage that isn't really that relevant. Look, you've probably noticed a trend with Mahiru's taunts, and yeah, no point beating that dead horse, she's well and truly onto it already. Anyway, things aren't going the best for the squad, but Guren manages to take control enough from the demon to head down to save Mito and Norito. With Norito, he's fighting off getting stabbed in the heart. He's not having much luck, but then Guren slams into the bathroom to cover it in Thousand Knights' blood. Norito makes a joke about how if Guren keeps saving him, he's going to fall in love. Which good, this man is a horrible hetero, please show him a better time, Norito. Guren, barely in control, manages to not kill Norito and runs away to save Mito instead. Norito can, rather obviously, see something is wrong with him, and his senses tell him that if he follows after him, he'll probably end up dead. But he's done being a coward, and he has a friend in danger. He follows. Guren is having a horrible time with his demon constantly singing in his head, but he manages to keep going. When he reaches Mito, the demon gleefully kills all of the soldiers and then tries to make Guren do worse to Mito. Unable to completely stop himself, almost far too gone in the demon's control, he does kiss her, but he manages to pull away before the demon can do more. Thank God. And then Norito catches up, casting illusion spells to distract Guren for long enough for him to swoop in and take Mito away. They're struggling to escape, but then the soldiers under Shinya's command outside come through finally, and they begin shelling the school with cannonballs loaded with Fudo scrolls. Touching them would make even Guren's demon mobilized for a short period of time. They end up in their classroom, and before Guren can pounce, Norito drags Mito outside just in time for the Fudo spells to completely seal the building, with Guren inside. Chapter 3, we see how Shinya's process was to position the troops outside, and when he gave the order to attack as Mito and Norito were escaping. In the meantime, Shinya has a quick conversation with Guren's dad about the future of the Ichinose clan, which is then immediately interrupted by Kirito tapping the phone very obviously. Kirito fakes going to Aichi Prefecture, where the Ichinoses are, in an attempt to mislead their enemies. He then rocks right up to the school beside Shinya, remarking about how far the demon-cursed gear research has come, and how he plans to reopen it now that they have a live demon sample trapped there. Norito and Mito are having their wounds tended to, and Shinya tells Kirito that they have to rescue Guren, as opposed to how Kirito words it as capture. Kirito relents, agreeing, and sets to work on making the next step of cursed gear. Chapter 4, Guren is trapped inside the classroom and boldly ruining desks with his newfound strength. Suddenly, his phone rings, and it's Mahiru. He answers, sounding as tired as we all are of Mahiru at this point. They have another lover spat, and Mahiru hangs up as fast as she rang in the first place. Then all hell breaks loose. The spell is broken on the windows, and in burst Shinya, Norito, Mito, and a bunch of other soldiers, all holding katanas cursed with demons. His demon kicks into gear, screaming at him to kill them all. They have a fight tossing around the room while Guren tries his best to keep his body and demon from killing everyone. They manage to trap Guren in a spell of chains, with Shinya getting caught in it as well. They both go down, their demons being bound, and Shinya yells at Guren to go subdue his demon. Guren blacks out, waking up in the white space of his mind where the demon lives. Noya is, understandably, very pissed. But Guren is sick of hearing it, and goes on a speech about how humans need companions. He's too weak to be alone, he needs friends. But friends will betray you. So, I was supposed to die here today. What other lives do I have left to lose? Fair point, Guren. Then he tells Noya to get lost, and he does, finally. Guren's mind is his own again, for now. Once Guren wakes up, they all go to the student council office to see Kirito. There's some usual casual banter between them, and Kirito states how he's listening into what Mahiru was saying on the phone as well. He's preparing to beat Mahiru in their stage race to complete Cursed Gear. He says they can finally have the upper hand, and he's ready to just fucking smash Mahiru up. To be fair, she has been making an idiot of him recently, so yeah. Basically, everything Kirito does is to try and fuck with Mahiru, and it shows. Kirito gives Guren a mission. He has 30 days to kill Mahiru, or Kirito will start killing off his followers, starting with his father. It's Mahiru or his father, the entire Ichinose clan, Sayuri, and Shigure. He leaves knowing Kirito will follow through with it if he doesn't kill her. Out in the corridor, Shinya, Norito, and Mito heard everything. They agree to stay by his side and help him with his horrible decision he has to make. They have a little woo group handpile moment, closing out the 4th book. The epilogue is surprisingly deep and intense. It starts with the whole gang hanging out in Guren's apartment once more. They're doing team bonding again. Sayuri and Shigure are cooking dinner and the others are playing Bomberman on the TV, a crucial detail to this story. They gather around for dinner and the doorbell chimes. Guren goes to answer the door, expecting orders from Kirito and Mahiru's location so they can finally go fight her. Surprise, surprise, it's not the orders, but Mahiru herself. I just couldn't stay away, she says. She knows what he has to do, and she's resigned to it. Guren draws his blade just as the others notice what is going on. He plunges it through her shoulder, pushing her out the window and down the side of the building. She questions why he didn't go for the heart, and he sobs about being too weak to do it. She stops their double suicide, though, breaking Guren's fall and using her demon to recover her injuries. She mentions how she left him a love letter upstairs before running off. He goes back to find the letter, something incredibly important on the experimentation of the Seraph of the End, the project that is being carried out by the Thousand Knights to bring the world to an end. In it are a list of children being experimented on, ones we all know very well from the manga series. Yuichiro Amane, Mikaela Shindo, Shiho Kumizuki, Mirai Kumizuki, Yoichi Satome, Tomoe Satome. Guren feels sick reading the details, and can't help but wonder just what is in store for the world at the end of the year. Tick-tock. Book 5. Teamwork makes the dream vampires go away. We start on an epilogue. It's Guren, don't question it. Guren and Shinya are hanging out at his apartment, smashing out some games of fake Bomberman TM. Like mature adults, not having a world ending in a mere few months. The others are hanging around, watching, before joining in the jesting to poke fun at each other. Guren mentally reflects on how this time wasting is in itself a form of training by keeping them stable. Even if the world was to end tomorrow, at least he would have this moment. The prologue takes us along with Mahiru, who is off visiting little Yu-chan. Yu was taken away to somewhere under the Thousand Knights' protection, following the incident with his mother when she set everything on fire. Mahiru comments on how everyone has called him a demon, and why Yu would be considered a demon. Yu mostly ignores her and tells her to stop talking to the demon child. She begins to make him question just why he is a demon, when he looks human enough to her, and we can trust Mahiru on what's human or not. She's a bit of an expert at this point. Yu cries about how his parents are dead and he has nothing left. Mahiru questions his reason for living, and why shouldn't he deserve one? Why shouldn't a monster have a reason to live? They're interrupted by a member of the Thousand Knights, who comments on how talking to the boy is going to be pointless, as they'll be erasing his memories. But still, she gives him one last question to think about. But tell me, Yu, if there's no real meaning or value to life, what will you live for? A question we see him asked once again in the manga series much later. Chapter 1. Guren goes to visit Shinoa all alone in her apartment. He walks into a dark room with the curtains drawn, and Shinoa lying boldly on the couch. They talk about where Mahiru might be and how Shinoa knows nothing. Guren presumes it's partly because Mahiru might be trying to protect her sister by keeping her in the dark. He calls Sayuri to prepare dinner, mentioning how they will be having a guest over. Shinoa very clearly states how she will not be going, but Guren just ignores her. He hangs up and almost immediately Shinoa's phone rings. The only calls I get are from wrong numbers, telemarketers, and my sister, she says. Guren answers it, knowing it's going to be Mahiru. I'm calling because I'd like you to purchase this amazing 400,000 yen vacuum cleaner. It sweeps, it mops. Guren is quick to call her out on the bullshit and get to the point. He needs to know where she is. His followers and father will die if he doesn't hurry. They know the line is being tapped, and Mahiru playfully jokes instead of giving her location. Kirito, who is obviously listening in, texts Guren to keep her on the line while he narrows down her location. They talk. Mahiru knows his whole clan is on the line, and on the other side of the scales to her life. Kirito is closing in, and Mahiru was calling Guren out for being so selfish, wanting to save everyone, even her. She hangs up, knowing Kirito is on his way. Guren is left behind, once again. After the call ends so horribly, Shinoa ends up agreeing to come to his place for food. Meanwhile, Kirito heads to where Mahiru's phone signal was coming from. It's an old warehouse at the docks. His squads of cursed gear-wielding soldiers move in, but it's deadly quiet. He walks in to find a stuffed teddy bear sitting in the middle of the dark, dim building. In between the bear's mouth sits 2 phones, which Kirito takes. There's an unsent message in the text, of which he knows is addressed to him. Mahiru teases him about how little of a threat he is to her, and how she's heading to Kyoto and leaving Tokyo. Then, in a childish twist, she says the phone will be exploding on 3, 2, 1. Kirito throws the phone, and nothing happens. Of course, Mahiru is full of lies, but also so many of her actions have force behind them as well, so it's never known if what she says will come true or not. She then rings him up to gloat in person. Kirito threatens to torture and kill Guren if she doesn't reveal her location. She teases him, he gets angry, you know the drill. Chapter 2. Mahiru pays a visit to the Hyakuya orphanage. She dreams about eating some fatty tuna and doing something fun before the world ends. She runs into one of the orphans playing around the orphanage. It's a little Akane, stopping to talk curiously to Mahiru. They discuss their love interests, and Mahiru talks about Guren not being her boyfriend. But come on girl, you are not fooling anyone. Akane knows Mahiru is there to adopt one of the kids, a little boy younger than her and Mika at the time called Junji. She was taking him to experiment in the Seraph of the End project, of course. Akane asks if Mahiru was going to be nice and treat Junji well, and boy does Mahiru's slimy little eyes come out of her mouth at this point. She then directs the conversation to something else. Does Akane have someone she's crushing on? She makes it obvious when someone calls out to her and her face blushes. Mika comes over to see Akane and notices Mahiru standing there. Mahiru knows who he is, of course. Just like with you, she's seen his file and knows he's one of the Thousand Nights' most prized experiments. Junji doesn't want to leave Mika's side, but Mahiru tries to coax him over. She is here to pick him up, after all. Mika asks who she is, and Mahiru dishes out some hot lies again. He manages to get down and convince Junji to go with Mahiru, saying that they will always be family even when he was gone. Junji relents and heads out with Mahiru. They head out to a nearby car, and once inside, Mahiru snaps the neck of the driver. Before Junji can say anything, she knocks him out and drives away. A police car catches up to her almost too perfectly, and she ponders who is chasing her and from what organization. She notices someone climbing out in her rearview mirror and sees very sharp fangs in their mouth. Vampires were after her. She calls on Ashomaru's power and slices her car in half, preparing for battle. Chapter 3. We're back to Guren and Shinoa. They get into a taxi, taking off to the sweet sound of an annoyed taxi driver complaining non-stop to them. They stop at a red light, and Guren hears explosions going on above them. They quickly exit the car, dragging the driver out too, just as a dump truck lands on top of the taxi. Above them is an expressway snaking through the districts. Something was going on up there, and Guren wants to know what it is. He throws money at Shinoa, telling her to get out of there and get food on the way home. The delicious home-cooked meal is cancelled, sadly. She tells him to be careful before running off, leaving Guren alone. He hurries up a nearby building complex, racing to the top for an aerial view. He looks down at the ruined highway, noticing 6 figures standing atop now abandoned cars. He recognizes one of the figures, dressed in a sailor suit with a katana blade. She was keeping a young boy clutched close, and the other 4 were advancing on her. Guren notices the glint of fangs, probably with his super demon powers. The vampires overpower Mahiru, starting to drain her of blood. Guren moves to leap down, but Mahiru looks up his way and mouths, "Do nothing, just watch." He stops and watches as she says something to the vampires about taking her to their queen in Kyoto. He doesn't make out the rest of what she says, but the vampires stop attacking and take off with her. Guren laments not being strong enough, once again, to be able to save her. Noya taunts him for not accepting his power, not accepting him. Guren would never get stronger without accepting his demon. He goes to follow, but one of the vampires stopped him, questioning if he's one of the girl's allies. He moves to fight, but obviously stands no chance against a vampire. He's forced to stand down, letting the vampires take Mahiru and run off. He goes to investigate the scene, seeing Mahiru's sword still lying there. He recalls the name she used to summon the sword, Ashomaru. Noya warns him not to touch the blade, as Guren is his human and he doesn't want Guren taking in another demon. Guren quips about demons getting jealous now, but Noya just brushes him off. Ashomaru soon disappears, unable to stay materialized with Mahiru being so far away. Kirito takes this moment to slide into Guren's DMs, asking what happened. Guren jokes about being at home eating dinner, but Kirito calls out his bullshit. He then asks if Mahiru is still around, to which Guren says no. Guren says to stay there as his men approach, but Guren says fuck it and goes home to eat. They let him pass and he heads home, grumbling about how Mahiru was still calling all the shots. Chapter 4. We're going on a class trip. Guren is back at his apartment, mulling everything over. Obviously, he had to follow after Mahiru to Kyoto, like the good little tortoise he was. Suddenly, he gets a call from his father, ringing to check up on him. It's staged from Kirito, of course, and his father has no choice but to call Guren. He asks how Guren is going and apologizes for being too weak to do anything for him. Guren instead rants at Kirito, stating how he plans to act against Mahiru and doesn't need coercing, but the line is already dead. In his anger, he throws the phone at his TV, smashing it to pieces. He watches himself in the shattered remains. His retainers watch him, asking what's wrong. He tells the truth. His father's life is on the line if they don't kill Mahiru by the end of the month. Sayuri and Shigure are noticeably worried, of course, but they want to help. Guren states how in the next few days, they would get everything together and go kill Mahiru and save his father. Just then, the intercom rings, and it's Miho, Norito, and Shinya. The whole gang is at Guren's now. They were listening in to the conversation on the phone, and they all went to help. Guren looks at all of them around him, his friends. In his reflection of the shattered glass, the same tired person still stares back, but he seems more at ease now. They discuss how to plan their next move. They need to head to Kyoto to chase after Mahiru, but as they were now, they weren't able to take her down. They needed to release the chains on their demons, to suck more power from them. But only the Hiragis have the means to do so they'll need permission from Kurito to do so first. Mahiru and Kurito, they were still stuck so firmly between the two Hiragis dancing ahead of them. Guren goes into his room to retrieve the love letter Mahiru had left him, with the details on the Seraph of the End experiment. He brings it out and hands it to Shinya for the others to read. He discusses what happened on the expressway, and how Mahiru was heading to Kyoto to meet with the Vampire Queen. They discuss the contents of the file Mahiru had given him. Guren mentions how he had met one of the children listed before, Mikhaila Shindo, with the 1,000 Knights. He ponders if Saito might be planning to betray the 1,000 Knights and take it all for himself with Mahiru. He wonders if Saito had been leaking information without permission and just how much of it Mahiru was involved in. They're interrupted by a knock at the door. They freeze up, wondering who it could be. Guren opens the door, and it's Kurito, standing there in the flesh. He barges in, snorting at the meagre surroundings. They argue over how best to take down Mahiru, and Kurito comes up with his most banging idea yet. He's always played by the rules, his actions by the book, so he thinks, if I did something even Mahiru wouldn't expect, it would throw her plans out. So what does he do? He rings up Aoi, screaming about how Guren Ichinose has turned traitor. He struck me with a sword and the bleeding won't stop. Immediately, Guren Ichinose is now a traitor of the Imperial Demons, and they're going to start actively hunting him. They have 47 hours before Guren's dad is executed. Kurito hands them food as spell scrolls, designed to loosen the chains on their demons and enhance their powers. The effects are immediate, and Guren feels even more powerful now, with even more desire to feed his demon. He attacks Kurito to give him physical evidence of his insurrection to prove it's real to Mahiru. Helicopters are on the way to take them out, and Guren uses Kurito as a shield to get the whole gang into one of them and hijack it. Kurito, to keep up the act, yells after them, "You'll regret this!" Guren scoffs, "I started regretting things a long time ago." Chapter 5. They land the helicopter in the mountains outside of Kyoto in the early hours of the next morning. The trek down takes time, but they can't afford to enter straight into the city. Stores and buildings have surveillance cameras, and they can't risk being spotted so early. The girls are off in the forest relieving themselves, and Naruto decides now is the perfect time for them to all have a literal pissing contest. No, I am not shitting you. Guren and Shinya at first aren't having it, but soon get on board, and yep, they are having a pissing contest. Gotta relieve themselves while showing off, you know? The girls return, and they all set back off down the mountain. They talk about what formations they should use with their new roster. How and where will they all stand with their new weapons? And how best should they fight the vampires? They decide on the same formation they took on back in Ueno, fighting the chimera. They reach a farm and find an old truck, which Goshi goes to hotwire. He makes a joke about how the Goshi clan knows how to do it, and Mito counters how they're all taught to do it. Naruto immediately starts the engine, and Mito does a quick change, praising him and actually surprised at how fast he did it. Guren notices how the keys were already in the engine though, and wisely doesn't comment. Very bro move. They all pile in and take turns napping in the back while Naruto drives them into town. Meanwhile, in his mind, Guren is having a conversation with his demon. Noya is trapped behind a barrier keeping him at bay from taking over. He tries to beckon Guren over to step past and break the boundary, but Guren refuses. Noya asks what the point was if Guren wasn't here for power. What would a demon and a human have to talk about? He tries to taunt Guren into coming over, with information about Mahiru, the promise of power to protect his friends. But Guren isn't having it. He remembers playing games with his friends, and the memory of friendship keeps Noya's taunts at bay. Noya mentions how he might as well give Guren something Mahiru had entrusted him with, but he gives away nothing more. Guren easily slips out of his mind and away, having resisted the demon's temptation yet again. He wakes up to find everyone else is gone, except for Shinya, who is waiting in the truck for him to wake up. They've stopped at a love hotel along a highway, using the time to regroup and get clean clothes. They travel up to the floor into their room, beside the one rented for the girls. Inside, Norito is knocked out cold on the bed, and on the TV is a porno playing loudly. With perfect timing, Mito comes in to check on them, stuttering and blushing when seeing the TV screen. She chastises Guren over it before running out, and Norito reveals himself to have woken up and heard it all. The girls all file in, wearing changed and fresh clothes. They huddle around, thinking about their situation once more. They had 34 hours before Guren's father would be executed. Suddenly, something heavy thunks down at Guren's feet. It's Ashomaru, the blade Mahiru had wielded on the expressway. It seems Noya had taken it instead, keeping it somewhere until he could give it to Guren. Everyone else is understandably freaked out by a blade suddenly appearing at Guren's feet. Shinya asks if having Mahiru's blade here will give away their position. As soon as he voices the thought, they spring into battle position, just in time for a woman to come crashing through the window. Guren notices the red eyes and knows this is a vampire. He charges into battle, slashing and attempting to take her out. She's fast, of course, and keeps Noya's blade away easily. He loses the blade at one point and tries to get Noya back to him while still dodging around everyone and the vampire. Noya tells him to not dodge and focus on grabbing him first, so he could heal up Guren. It's a risky move to trust a demon's word, but Guren does. It works, and he has the sword back by his side. Noya comments on how dumb it is to trust a demon, of course, and Guren replies by saying he is dumb and has to trust his friends to get through. Noya says he's not Guren's friend, and Guren orders him to say yes, you have to be now. Noya relents, lending his strength enough to slay a vampire. He charges, but of course the vampire is stronger, but he's not alone, and his friends help distract the vampire so he can reach her neck, slicing through it. She screams, planning to end Guren right then and there, but then Guren chastises her. He's just the decoy. Shinya, behind her, slices off the arm carrying her weapon. Sayuri takes it away, and they work at hacking off her limbs to immobilize her. They had a prisoner now, and could get information on Mahiru, finally. We swap to Mahiru, who is down in the vampire city deep underground, tied to a cross and being tortured, kept fed and watered just enough to stay alive. She makes some silly comments and is interrupted by an observer, Queen Cruel Tepish. She comments on how Mahiru isn't talking, and they play word games back and forth. Neither of them can kill each other, they have something the other wants. And then Mahiru summons Shikama Doji, and the Reaper-like scythe appears in her hand, freeing her easily. She always had the power to free herself, but she obviously chose not to. Cruel asks why. She says because she needs something from Cruel, but doesn't expand on this. She asks for the date, and Cruel gives it, December the 2nd. They're in the final month now, where the world will end in just 23 days. Cruel asks again, does Mahiru know where her family is, where Ashira Tepesh is? Mahiru does, of course. It was the demon that had been hidden inside her when she was born, Ashumaru. The Seraph of the End will soon blow the trumpet of the apocalypse. Book 6, Let's Fight While the Clock Goes Tick-Tock. The prologue brings us back to the distant past with a child Mahiru and Guren. It's their first meeting as children, Guren off from the main house nursing his wounds from a recent sparring match. A young Mahiru comes up to him claiming to be a fairy. She asks if he's been bullied and he says no. They meet over the next several months with Mahiru constantly asking Guren questions. What's your favourite colour? Have you ever been in love? Don't you get tired of training all the time? And then Guren asks her a question. What do you want to be like when you're older? Mahiru answers in a very Mahiru way. She wants to be married so she can be a pretty bride and eat cake every day. The next time he's asking his father for money to buy a slice of cake, and he finds out men from the Hiragi clan are here asking after a missing person, someone called Mahiru Hiragi. He sneaks away to where Mahiru is waiting to share the cake. He tells her what he's learnt, that she's not actually a fairy and instead a member of the most powerful clan in Japan. She asks if Guren hates her now, and he says no. But why would she seek him out? He's just an Ichinose. She says it's obvious, to piss off her family by being nice and friendly to an Ichinose. But she understands he'll suffer if it gets out. Instead, she just says, I love you, Guren. When they're older, will he get strong enough to protect her, keep her safe? A dream, a simple dream of children that wasn't meant to last in their world. Chapter 1, Guren's father's execution is happening. He has some time in his cell to talk beforehand. Guren apologizes for not being able to save him. He couldn't reach Mahiru, he couldn't kill her to save his father. His father, ever the kind man, keeps smiling. Guren questions it. Sakae says he smiles because he's happy. He got to watch Guren grow up, and he's so proud of what he's done. He walks out and Guren shouts how he's proud to be his son. Minutes later, still standing in the cell, Guren is approached by Kurito. It's done. His father is dead. Kurito expresses how he was against the execution, more than satisfied with the captured vampire as a result. But all the other clans, and his father, the head of the clan Tenri Hiragi, voted to kill Sakae. Guren walks out to pick up his father's corpse, ignoring the stares from the watchers as he goes. His anger towards the Hiragis grows, and Noya pops up to express his glee at the desire rolling off him. His friends were watching, though, and Shinya quickly rings to tell him that they'll take care of the body, and he didn't have to do it. Naruto and Mito are in the background agreeing wholeheartedly. Guren tells them to stay away, though. Everyone is watching after all, but they can come to his place later and cheer him up with video games. He hangs up quickly before picking up his father's body. And the young new leader of the Ichinose clan carried his father's body away. Chapter 2. Guren attends his father's funeral. He returned to the Aichi Mountains, to home, to have the ceremony. Afterwards, Guren retreats to his private gardens, having a moment of silence alone, until Sayuri and Shigure interrupted, asking if he was okay. They tell him to rest or nap, as he's sure to be exhausted by now. Then Shinya arrives, carrying a box holding a console inside. Guren tells him to get out, he's quote-unquote busy, but Shinya is persistent. He says Guren called him to come cheer him up, and so here he is. In a serious moment of their friendship, Shinya tells him it's alright if he wanted to vent for a little. Shinya will sit and listen. Guren says he's already cried. He's fine. Then, Mito and Naruto come into the garden, having obviously come over with Shinya. Guren makes a remark on how they didn't have to come, but he's begrudgingly grateful to have them here. Very tsundere. The gang all starts to settle down, and the atmosphere shifts to a pleasant buzz. Shinya leads over to whisper to Guren. What were they going to do now? They no longer needed to keep searching for Mahiru so frantically. The death of Guren's father and the captured vampire and Ashumari handed over had given Kirito enough to stop the punishment. So then, what would they do, so powerless on their own? They decide to continue searching for Mahiru, for their own sakes. Guren looks around him, and he thinks how glad he is to have these people in his life. He dreams, and they're the dreams of his demon. Noya feeds on his desire for revenge, to destroy the Haragis for all they've done. Guren tells him to shut up, but Noya is having a blast. He ponders to remember to thank Mahiru for giving him to Guren. He likes this human in his hidden darkness. Over the next few days, the funeral continues. Houses and clans loyal to the Ichinoses present themselves to Guren, offering condolences. He sees 2 young boys during the time, from minor clans under the Ichinoses. These boys are Makoto Narumi and Shusaku Iwasaki. He asks what they want, to seek him out. Narumi wastes no time, blurting out in a childish way how they saw the broadcast of Guren's father's death, and what Guren was going to do about it. It was a taboo subject. Of course Hiragi spies could be lurking around. No one was discussing it, but everyone still pricked their ears, curious for the answer. Guren tells the boys they're dirt, they deserve it, and they'll never be better. But then he grabs the boy by the collar, pulling him closer. He whispers how he'll be changing that, and to shut up and follow him into the grandeur future. Narumi looks at him in awe, agreeing to trust Guren. The day after, the funeral comes to an end, and Guren heads back to Shibuya with the whole gang. Chapter 3. Guren is summoned to the headquarters of the Imperial Demons. He's made to wait excruciatingly long on the Haragi's whim. Then they bring him in and force him to kneel down to the ground in front of the Haragi leader, Tenri. Tenri makes him bow down to the ground, and while Guren is down, he stomps down on Guren's head, smashing it into the floor. Guren holds back his rage, taking it until Tenri is satisfied. He acknowledges Guren as the new Ichinose clan leader and then sends him out. Kirito is waiting for him outside, offering him a handkerchief for his wounds. Guren ignores it, barking at why he's here. Kirito says he's using Guren's moment of weakness to get on his good side. Guren scoffs and they walk out. Back at his apartment, Shigure and Sayuri fret over Guren's bloody face. They go to get water to tend to his wounds, and meanwhile Guren heads further inside, where he finds Saito waiting for him on the couch. He asks what the fuck Saito is doing in his house, and Saito replies coolly about how the Thousand Knights and Imperial Demons were allies now, working together to advance the demon curse in common interest. So why wouldn't he be allowed here? He comments on how strange it is Guren's guards hadn't come back yet, and Guren freezes. He sees his guards knocked unconscious in the hallway, covered in Saito's chains. Don't move unless you want me to kill them, Saito says. Then he attacks, chains flying at Guren. Guren waits till the last minute, and then strikes, drawing Noya to deflect the chains. They stand off after that, and Guren asks why he and Mahiru are working together. Saito jokes that he might be Mahiru's new boyfriend, to which Guren says nothing. Saito laughs at the joke, and Guren demands he answers his questions. He asks who Mikaela and Yuichiro are. He knows they're experiments, but he wants to know why it seems like Saito had purposely let Guren see them. What were they doing with these children? He thinks it's a biological weapon, but Saito is quick to shoot the idea down. Divine punishment, he says. And he still wants Guren to join him. He'll give information on Mahiru, the Seraph of the End, on everything. Guren refuses, once again, dismissing Saito's ideology as a fucked up cult. Also, he wants Guren to kill his friends, and that's a huge no-no to Guren. Guren asks Noya for more power, and Noya feeds him an excessive amount to try and take down Saito. But Saito is always faster, so fast he's on the roof by the time Guren swung where he was. They keep dancing around like this, with Guren always too slow. And then with the next swing, Saito pulls Sayuri up as a human shield, and Guren is too slow to stop his attack. He ends up slicing off Shigure's arm and freaks out. Saito once again beckons him to join, to kill his guards and become like him, to have the strength Guren has always wanted. Saito keeps him talking, babbling nonsense about how mad they were, and some details of his past, about how he was once a vampire by the rank of second progenitor. Guren recalls how the vampire in Ueno, Ferid Bathory, had referred to himself as a seventh progenitor. Eventually, he manages to get Saito to leave, rushing out the window. The moment he's gone, Guren races to Shigure's side, fretting over how much he let Saito waste time. He rings Kirito immediately, and Kirito is on it straight away, sending a helicopter to bring them to the labs. Guren waits outside where Shigure has been operated on. Shinya is quick to ring him, having heard Kirito's phone call, and wondering what really happened. Guren makes up a story about how Shigure's hand just slipped chopping carrots, and whoops, off goes the arm. Shinya ignores it, asking for the truth, to which Guren snarkily replies how he wasn't the only shifty freak listening in on his phone. A valid point, I gotta say. Everyone is listening into everyone's phones these days, it's all the range. Guren says he'll discuss it with him later. After Shinya hangs up, Sayuri calls him, having woken up and is fretting to find herself alone, with blood all over the floor. Guren reassures her it's fine, and he'll explain later. Then it's Kirito's turn. He walks over to Guren asking for a report. Guren tells him about Saito, all the things he said, and what Guren already knew about the strange assassin. Kirito comments on how strange it is for Mahiru to be working with someone like that. Guren can see it though. He knows Mahiru is like that she would do anything, ever the hair spitting towards her demise. Guren tells Kirito he wants to catch Mahiru, and Kirito says they will. Follow him, and they would get there. Guren isn't so sure, but he has no choice. On his way home, he runs into a gang of people, with their leader standing in the center. Seshiro Hiragi. He's here for revenge, for how much of an idiot Guren made him look like. Guren isn't taking it this time, however. He's quick to mock Seshiro over how his father doesn't care if Seshiro lives or dies. He would deserve it for being duped by an Ichinose, and insulting the Hiragi name. He's done with this shit. He draws his blade, intent on beating the maulish Seshiro to a pulp. But before he can deal Seshiro a blow, Shinya interrupts, stopping him before he can do something stupid. Seshiro scurries away, and Shinya asks Guren if he's having a bad day or something. Guren promises to tell him about it once he's home and showered. Shinya comments on how Guren could have gone full out back there with Seshiro, but he purposely waited until he knew Shinya was there before attacking. Even now, Guren is still the hesitant little tortoise, too slow to act and catch up, too bent down with his bonds. They muse about the magic of friendship, about how life was barely worth living without others there to live beside you. Would it mean anything to be alive, then? Shinya begins to monologue about his past, about how he had no goals or ideals, only to survive and then to be Mahiru's fiancé. If he could never get strong enough, then what was he aiming for? He admits that meeting Guren was his goal for a while, the one who had stolen his fiancé's heart before he had even had the chance to meet her. He jokes about how Guren wasn't worth the wait, some light jesting, and then he says he understands. He knows why Mahiru is drawn to him. Guren never gives up, he always tries his best to protect those important to him. He tells Guren he should take a moment to let his friends lead him, cry on their shoulder and the like, spoil him. They ponder what friendship means. Is it really weak to want to rely on our friends? It was what Guren wanted. He wanted friendship, even if it meant being weak. He asked Shinya if they couldn't break from their limitations and become gods. Then what of Mahiru's goals? She was spiraling on that very path. Shinya thinks on it. Maybe if you put in the practice and belief, you can eventually get there. He uses Mito as an example, who had fallen in love with playing Bomberman and had gone past very hard mode to even beat insane mode. If you keep at something, you can beat it, even on insane mode. It was the opposite of what Saito and Mahiru had been preaching. Here Shinya was saying that they should be protecting and supporting each other, the kind of thinking that kept you human. They head back to Guren's, where Norito and Mito are waiting. Sayuri had taken care of all the destruction and fixed everything up. What a legend. They talk, letting the night waste away. Others would consider it a squandered day with so little time left before the world ended, but to Guren, every single day was precious. Chapter 4. It's December the 2nd. Mahiru steps out of the vampire's underground city and into the streets of Kyoto. Saito is there to greet her, welcoming her into her new vampire life. The world above had turned beautiful and bright, too bright. She felt herself uncaring for such beauty, too distracted by her thirst thrumming in her throat. Saito hands her a ring meant to guard against the UV rays of the sun. The world falls a little darker once she dons it, and it's more comfortable. With his back turned, Mahiru decides to test her strength. She strikes with her new speed, but it's still not enough to hit Saito, who easily stops her scythe between his fingers. Even with all the added power, a monster like her isn't enough to stop this man. What did that make Saito, then? He leaves soon after giving his gift, and Mahiru rips it off her hand, crushing it to pieces. She would make her own, not accept a gift from someone like Saito. She finds herself growing thirsty, lusting after blood. She drags the first person she can find into an alley, draining them dry. She's unable to stop herself, lost in the pleasure that comes from drinking blood. She then looks to the setting sun, sighing happily. It was time to return to Tokyo. Meanwhile, back in Shibuya High, the Imperial demons have been outfitting everyone with cursed gear for their experiments. Sometimes a student couldn't handle it and would lose control. Guren is called in to stop one such student, going on a rampage and killing people in the school. By the time he reaches them, they have a girl cornered, slowly killing her. Guren isn't fast enough to save her and watches her die before he's able to get to them. The boy then lunges at him, and Guren uses barely any of Noya's power to stop him. He's grown thanks to the faster research the Imperial demons are making in cursed technology. So much so it only takes 3/10 of the power he used to use. He knocks the boy out, ignoring Noya's cries to kill him in his ear. Then someone approaches, clapping him for his performance. It's Mahiru. Guren quickly makes a connection. Mahiru had sent the boy on a rampage to take out security cameras and leave the area clear of all but her and Guren. She asks how everything is going and how much use he has gotten out of Ashimaru. Without him, they wouldn't have been able to advance so fast in their demon research. She comments on how less of a human he looks now too. The most powerful kind of demons they have to be able to harness, the Black Demon series, were too powerful for humans to handle alone. They needed to undergo a complex surgery to alter their minds and bodies before they were able to control the Black Demons. Noya, of course, being one of them. Only 3 people had been strong enough to survive such a surgery so far. Kirito, Shinya, and Guren, of course. It was what was boosting his power, making it easier to use Noya's strength. He lets it all inside him, letting Noya possess him. It's all but letting Noya take full control, just a slither of Guren left to handle the reins. Noya floods into him, and Mahiru comments on how strong he looks now. Guren has enough strength to reach Mahiru's level now. If only they had been like this as children, then they could have had the power to run away together. He's going to take her in now. He'll save her. The world won't end. They'll stop it together. But Mahiru just smiles. He's still not strong enough. But everyone else is already in position. He knows the gang have set up around him. Shinya is behind Guren down the hall with his black demon weapon, a gun with a bayonet at the end. He shoots, and a white tiger explodes from the gun, barreling towards Mahiru. It's fast, and Mahiru's movement is slow. This time, they would hit. And then... Mahiru just laughs. "I hope you didn't get your hopes up," she says. Suddenly, she swings her scythe, and Guren can barely dodge the strikes. How does she get so strong so fast? Where was this strength coming from? Still, Guren is confident they can win over time, even if Mahiru was to kill him. Norito's illusions roll in, and Mahiru jumps to escape them. The window is blocked by Shigure's kunai, giving Guren an opening as Mahiru swings her scythe to destroy it. But his blade goes straight through her. It's an illusion. Mahiru knows Fuda spells as well, of course. Shinya shoots from behind, forcing Mahiru back. They all manage to jump into the fray and encircle her. Finally, they've gotten her. She drops her scythe in surrender, dropping to her knees at Guren's demand. He questions her, knowing this to be too easy. He asks what she came to accomplish. She says to protect him and her sister. Her weapon was down. She didn't have Ashimaru anymore. She was defenseless. Except this was Mahiru. Rabbit quick, she swings a kick into Guren's stomach. It should have been little more than a slight winding for him, but the impact sends him flying backwards, knocking his brain around in his skull. She's on top of him quickly, and they start struggling. Mahiru leans in close to whisper. The scythe weapon she has wielded, Shikama Doji, had shrunk into a small key-like object, and she slipped it into Guren's pocket. She says to give it to Shinoa, revealing the reason she is here. It looks like she's about to leave, but then she buries her mouth into his neck, and sharp fangs pierce his skin. She pulls back, giving a smile with lips covered in blood. You see, you haven't caught up yet, after all. Shinya and the others manage to use Norito's illusions to get Mahiru off Guren, and they grab him to escape. Mahiru just watches them leave, having no interest in chasing them. She'd accomplished what she'd come to do. The next day, he's struggling with his decision. Should he do as Mahiru asks and give Shinoa the weapon, or should he give it to the Imperial Demons, the Hiragis, and the Thousand Knights? If he did, then he would lose the chance to give it to Shinoa. While he's thinking, Mito is calling at the intercom. She has something she wants to discuss in person, so Guren relents and lets her up. Of course, she wants to talk about the night Guren came to save them all and subsequently lost control. She rambles for a bit before getting to the point. She wants to admit her feelings for him, and Guren knows this. He says, though, the world is ending. There's no future for them together. But they're still friends. Mito is one of his best friends. He doesn't plan on dying, and he doesn't plan on letting her die either. They have to stick together. She seems pleased at the knowledge she's such a close friend, able to leave now. The next day, December 12th, Kirito is leading a charge against the Thousand Knights experimental lab in Saitama. Several of the teams have been sent to the other bases of the Thousand Knights, charged with wiping out everyone and anyone inside. The truce is over, I guess, and all-out war is on the horizon. Again. But while they're crouched in preparation in the distance, they find that the base is already under attack. They see people drop from a helicopter from a height that would kill a normal person. Guren sees red eyes and fangs. Not more vampires, he groans. A vampire approaches them, asking if they're there with the Thousand Knights, and part of the Seraph of the End experiment. Kirito answers no, and another vampire comes up. Lukul Wesker, a noble. He questions why the humans are still alive, regardless of their involvement. Kirito keeps his men still, and they decide to let the humans go, ignoring them. They escape with their lives. Days later, all of the Thousand Knights' bases have been destroyed. Around the world, the vampires rose up to annihilate the Thousand Knights. Within days, the entire organization is wiped from the magical underworld. On a whim, Guren decides to visit the Hyakuya orphanage, despite the warnings by Mahiru to stay away. It's abandoned, with items and things scattered around everywhere. He catches the names of a few children, one being Mikhaila Shindo, one he knows to be a research subject. He reads a journal entry saying how the children were sad that they had to move. Guren realizes that the children had been taken away days before the vampire's attack, which meant the Seraph of the End experiment would be continuing. He rings Kirito, reporting his findings. The clans that had reported the destruction of the orphanage, Ni and Kuki, immediately go on Kirito's radar as traitors. Then, as if on cue, an attack is launched on their base. It's Mahiru with the Ni clan leader, launching an assault on the Imperial demons under Kirito. He hangs up abruptly to go deal with them, leaving Guren hanging. If the Ni and Kuki clans had revolted, then what was to stop the others doing the same? The world was ending, the 25th spiraling faster towards them. Guren ends up going to Shinoa's apartment to deliver the scythe. She asks what it's for, and Guren says it's to protect her from the end of the world. Before he can leave the building, they're surrounded by attackers outside. They're not Thousand Knights though, not this time. Supporting Imperial demon uniforms instead. The gang rings him up, expressing concern that his apartment was on fire. He tells them the clans have rebelled, and to meet up with him so they can tackle everything together. Guren takes Shinoa downstairs and steals the guy's motorbike, gunning it down the road to meet up with his friends. A minivan pulls up alongside him, opening the side door to reveal Imperial demon soldiers. They wielded cursed gear, intent on fighting him. Clutching Shinoa, Guren doesn't have the room or maneuverability to handle them. But he doesn't have to. Shinya rolls up on a motorbike beside him, shooting the minivan and bursting it into a sea of flames. He was listening into Guren's call to Kirito, of course, and knew what was happening. They stop, and Naruto and all the others pull up in a minivan of their own. Get in, losers. We're rebelling, basically. Where do they go now? What do they do? Everything is coming to a head. Only 2 days left until the world is set to end. Guren tries to get them to turn away and save themselves, but they all call him an idiot. Their minds are already made up. They're all in this together. If they survive, they'll spend Christmas playing video games and eating cake, he says. He rings Mahiru's number. It picks up. Guren. Mahiru. Are you ringing to invite me on a Christmas date? She asks. I want to betray the Hiragis and need your help. Mahiru laughs gleefully. Time ticks on, closer to that day. Book 7. Here we are, together at the end. This is the final book in the series. Here we go. Chapter 1. We begin right where we left off, Mahiru and Guren's phone call. He's prepared to betray the Hiragis and work with her now. She jokes about Guren being too late. It's 2 days before Christmas, a bit late to ask for a Christmas date. You know everyone is listening in on this call, right? She tells him. Of course he knows, and he knows this is broadcasting his clan betraying the Hiragis. But what he didn't realize is making this call in the presence of Mito and Naruto would also drag their clans into the betrayal status. Mahiru had set this all up. Knew this would happen, of course. Guren tries to pry her location from her, but Mahiru is as solid as a rock when she wants something. She tells him she's on a secret little mission to kill Kirito. Then she hangs up, and their van is assaulted by a bunch of Hiragi lackeys. Shinya takes charge, getting out his sexy gun weapon Byakumaru and starts firing on the attacking vehicles. Guren takes a call from Sayuri's father, head of her family, and he tells him to start the rebellion, to last until Christmas. Their van is rammed into by another car, and they can't continue to drive in it. They make a break for it on foot, with Naruto slinging an unconscious Shinoa over his shoulder. Guren makes a joke about this being the one above extra hard mode, and Mito clarifies it as nightmare mode. Yes, they're playing on nightmare mode, where one shot can kill you and you don't come back. Guren lets his power run wild through him, and Noya pops up in his mind. Is this the final showdown? He asks. Yes it is. Guren rushes into the enemies, with Shinya backing him up. They tear through the Hiragi forces, and Guren comments on how he thought he recognized some of their faces, some of his schoolmates. Old schoolmates. He watched their heads roll as they become corpses on the ground. They couldn't stop now. They had to keep running, keep going, to catch up to Mahiru. Chapter 2. Shinoa wakes into darkness. She's used to it, no one and nothing paying attention to her. That's how she's lived her life up until now. Her sister was the exceptional one, always taking on all the work and burdens. She remembers how she took something from her sister's boyfriend before, and feels a small key-like object in her hand. The moment she touches it, she's warped into a pure white world. Except in here, a voice answers her thoughts. Her weapon morphs into a scythe in front of her, saying it was here to watch her. She deduces the weapon is a demon, and asks if it's here to devour her desire. It answers yes, but her desires aren't strong enough yet. She hasn't met her fated person yet, and wouldn't for another 8 years. Shinoa points out how that's pointless if the world is going to end in 2 days, but the demon was here to protect her from that. She asks for the blade's name, and it's revealed to be Shikama Doji, a demon with will and memories, something Shinoa, even in her young age, knows isn't normal. Then she remembers moments from years ago when she used to have horrible nightmares about a beautiful haunted demon talking to her. Mahiru had been terrified when she had told her and helped train her so Shinoa would be able to protect herself and wouldn't tell others. Shikama reveals that Mahiru ripped them apart before and took all of Shikama into herself. Shikama tells her to open her eyes and wake up or Guren will die, so she does. She wakes up in the middle of a battlefield, still slung over Norito's shoulder. She uses her new link with Shikama to materialize the scythe into the real world. Norito freaks seeing the blade suddenly over his shoulder and puts her down so she can help fight. Shinya sees her and says, "Good morning, it's now officially Christmas Eve." They have been fighting Hiragi forces all night. They plan to move on and Shinoa says she'll stay, this has nothing to do with her after all. While they argue, Guren gets a text from Mahiru, who agrees to leave Shinoa. With Miss Goddess's approval, the gang shuffle off where Shinoa is left behind, wondering just what in the hell was going on with everyone. Chapter 3. We join Saito on a freeway transporting a very important piece of cargo. In the opposite seat in the front sits a young boy, sulking and looking out the window with tears clinging to his eyes. A little Yu. He asks where they're going and Saito says to the Hyakuya orphanage, where he'll meet new friends. Yu snaps back that he can't have friends, because no one can love a demon. Saito counters with how he isn't a demon, despite how Yu protests that his mother told him he was. Saito doesn't voice it, but notes how it wasn't even his real mother, and that they had sold Yu to human experimentation anyway, so it was pointless to dwell on. But Yu was too young to know better, and he was already caught in the strings of fate. Saito calls ahead to the orphanage and lets them know the situation. All the other facilities have been destroyed, and he's here to bring over one last child. The fated child, he says, a meaning only he understands, while gears turn only he can see. It begins to rain, washing away the blood from the streets on Christmas Eve. Chapter 4. We're brought to where Kirito is fighting the rebelling clans in Mahiru. He's exhausted, relying maybe too much on his black demon Raimeki and her lightning to survive. They had been fighting so long, spilling blood all over the grounds of Shibuya High. He sees Mahiru arrive and charges to strike her. Despite the power behind his strikes, Mahiru dodges easily, even though she's unarmed. She beats him easily, practically beating the shit out of him before grabbing him by the throat, holding him up to gloat over his pathetic attempt. He mentions how he stole enough time to surround them in snipers, though. Mahiru comments that his followers would never let him die, and Kirito agrees. But he had already planned for this and had cast an illusion in advance, one on his followers, so they would see him charging off to fight a different enemy, and they wouldn't see the person Mahiru was holding to be him. All the snipers fired at once, and Mahiru throws Kirito to the ground. He watches her dance through the air, swatting the bullets down with the blade feeding off her blood. He recognized it as a vampire's blade, one of a noble. Ah, things made sense now. Mahiru avoids Kurito's death trap, taking him by the arm and jumping high into the air. She's holding a bunch of Fuda spell scrolls, and Kurito comments on how she won't be able to break his spell with those. But she's not trying to break his, just the one she cast before it all started. He stares, confused, as the enemies his soldiers had been fighting all disappear below him. They had all been illusions. There was never a revolt, only a fake one Mahiru had puppeteered. She had already killed the clan head so they couldn't come to him to defend themselves. She leaves him with one last question to ruin his brain. How did the Hiragis get so powerful? He thinks. History and legend in their clans had told of one being leading the Hiragis for 200 years, something inhuman, operating behind the scenes. Who had decided the world would end tomorrow? Who was the decision maker? He briefly converses with Aoi about whether they seem human anymore. He asks her exactly why she serves him. The answer is obvious, because it's her job to. Her clan's lives are the Hiragis. But she answers truthfully, because her heart serves Kurito, not the Hiragis. He laughs at such a traitorous answer, feeling his trust for another person grow in response. He rings up his father, confirming of the world ending. Tenri is a dick, but reveals how Mahiru was definitely doing everything just how he wanted. How he had kept such a genius in line. Easy, Shinoa. Keeping the worst of the experiments away from her, letting Shinoa live, all to keep Mahiru in her cage. Tenri then asks if they need a hostage for him too, and suddenly Aoi is shot, her leg sliced clean off from the demon bullet. Kurito plays it pretty cool, saying they can go ahead and shoot her if he isn't doing enough. Kurito has always done well though, and no move is made to kill Aoi. Tenri instead is done, revealing one last thing before hanging up. Kurito would survive the world ending, but Mahiru wouldn't. Kurito rushes to reattach Aoi's leg, and makes the realization of what his father meant. Those with demon curses would survive, those without would die. They need to get as many people as possible to be infected with the demon before Christmas. Then Aoi asks what they should do about Guren's apparent insurrection. Kurito admits that they have to make an example, and just killing Guren would be good enough. The hunt is on in full force now, for Guren Ichinose. Chapter 5. Guren and the gang are holed up in a love hotel again. It's mere hours before Christmas Day, but he's still waiting for Mahiru to call him back. She said she would on the 23rd, but now it was almost the end of Christmas Eve and he had heard nothing. Most of the others were asleep, taking the rare chance to rest while they could. Guren's watching over them, when Shinya reveals himself to also be awake. They have a cheeky little talk about looking up girls' skirts to disguise how worried and tired they are. Guren asks why Shinya followed him. Shinya jokes, "What, into the love hotel?" He knows what Guren means. He says they just happen to be chasing down the same path. Guren says he's tired. Can they even pull this off? Save the world? Even if they did their best, they may not survive tonight. Everyone has slowly woken up to join in or listen to the conversation. They all agree it's better to be here, surrounded by their friends at the end. They have no regrets about following Guren. "Everyone," Guren says, "for the remaining 25 hours, I'll be accepting your lives. And I leave mine in your hands." The phone rings. It's Mahiru, he knows it. Suddenly the building is assaulted by Hiragi forces. The gang immediately jumps in to protect Guren while he's on the phone. He picks up while everyone battles around him. Mahiru cheerily greets him, muttering nonsense. He asks for her location, but she won't give it. He can hear the distant thump of something in the coal, and knows it's a clue. She eventually relents when Guren won't stop asking, saying she's in Ginza. It's a lie, of course. So many other people are listening into their conversation it's pointless to reveal their locations now. But Ginza is a hint, and the sound of what he thinks are industrial fans in the room are the other hint. He, somehow, knows just how many of these fans are in the underground labs of the Thousand Nights, old research labs that the vampires destroyed in their rampage to stop the Seraph experiments. He knows Mahiru isn't in Ginza, instead, she's in the Ikebukuro lab. They take off out of the Love Hotel building by jumping onto one of the surrounding helicopters. Yeah, things have gotten that serious. Guren's head must weigh a lot with the amount of gold out on this beast. They took out several pilots, downing the helicopters in a fiery rage below. People were dying already. They all ran off towards Ikebukuro. Miles away, time passing, it's Christmas Day, 6:20 p.m. Snow was gently falling. Saito stepped out of the car, having arrived at the orphanage. He goes to get Yu out of the car, who promptly locks the door. Saito unlocks it with his keys, but Yu just locks it again. They go back and forth for a few turns before Saito outspeeds him, ripping the door open and pulling Yu out and towards the doors to the orphanage. He noticed that a certain young experimental subject has picked up on another's arrival. Mikhaila watched them from the window above, and Saito says how he can feel fate shifts in the background. He takes Yu through the doors. An hour later, back in the heart of Tokyo, Guren's gang is still on its way to Ikebukuro. The waves of enemies were tough, but now they were lying ahead of them in wait, hundreds crowding around black fans and holding demon weapons. The gang stops ahead of the intersection, wheezing and out of breath. If they continue at their current pace, Guren knew Christmas would be over before they reach Ikebukuro. The world would end. They wouldn't have enough time to go around or fight everyone, so Shinya suggests two of them go out to distract, letting the others get around them. Naruto would be one, to cast an illusion to make it seem like they were all there. Shinya nominates himself as the other, while Guren fights saying it should be him. We all know that Guren needs to be the one to find Mahiru, though. Even Shinya and the others know it too, seems. But Guren isn't having it. He says none of his friends are dying here today. He won't abandon his friends just so he can move forward. He says they all survive or no one does. They die proudly together if that's all that's left for them. Shinya calls him out, and his dumb idea, fist already on its way to Guren's face, but he's crying and everyone is feeling the drama. While deciding what to do, Shinya asks why the soldiers aren't attacking them. The group wonders why, and they all come to the agreement that it was probably a diversion. They argue and consider just what is going on, but their enemies move before they have a chance to narrow down just what the heck is going on. They loose arrows towards them, arching through the sky. The gang springs into action, and Guren gives them his war cry. "If we die together!" Guren rushes forward, past a small fry onto the one holding the black demon weapon, Kirito. They fight, blades clashing, and Kirito leans in to whisper his true plan. He knows Mahiru was close by, actually in the lab underneath Shinjuku. He says he can't stop the catastrophe, but he's preparing for the future, and he leaves today for Guren. He brings back the axe, screaming, "Die now, Guren!" while Guren screams back at him. He manages to cut off Kirito's arm, making the act believable before the others catch up to him, hiding under one of Naruto's illusions. They race away, down into the research lab below their feet. It's abandoned, no one there left from the vampires attacked, but the lights are on. They descended the steps to the final room, on the lowest floor, a ritual room, where the experiment Mahiru was involved in would be conducted. They plan out their formation, with Shinya and Guren leading the charge. They enter the room. In the middle of the hall lay 7 coffin-like boxes. Beyond a figure lay crouched, one Guren knew far too well. Surrounding her were the corpses of 20 people, some in Imperial demon uniforms, some in lab coats. Mahiru notices them, turning around. "Ah, Guren, my Guren, you came." He begs her to tell him how to save her, but she says he can't. Then she strikes. They fight, but Mahiru's strong vampire powers make short work of everyone, piercing skin and snapping bones. Guren struggles to his feet. Mahiru tells him he doesn't have to stall for time. Mahiru will wait until his friends heal. They're weaklings anyway, and since he came here with them, there was no way he would catch up to the hair. Shinya butts in to defend Guren, but Mahiru isn't having any of that. She's suddenly right behind Shinya, hand ripping through his chest. Guren is by his side immediately, screaming his name. Shinya coughs up blood, unresponsive. He begs Mahiru to stop, and then begs Noya to give him the strength to save his friend. Noya says to accept all of him then, and Guren is ready to do so, finally, but it's too late for Shinya. And by the time Guren snaps back to look around, he notices it's too late for the others too. Norito, Mito, Shigure, and Sayuri. They're all lying decapitated on the ground. Just like that, Mahiru had killed them all in mere seconds. Guren is losing it. The death of his friends, he can feel the sorrow and anger drowning in his chest. Noya can use that. Turn into a demon, Guren, he says. Guren pleads to lose his mind, let him fall, disappear, join the others, but Shinya coughs. He's still alive. Guren races to his side. The blood won't stop though, and Guren is losing it. This is game over, Shinya says. Guren begs him not to die, but Shinya knows he's fading. He says he was glad to have met Guren though, and play games together. As Shinya's life faded, Guren held him tighter, weeping. Guren wanted to die, run away, anything, but he can't. He puts Shinya's corpse down, taking up his sword and standing. Mahiru asks if Guren hates her. He doesn't. But I broke something that was important to you, she says. But he won't, he can't. If he gets angry, Shinya will be mad at him. Mahiru suddenly shifts the conversation. It's 8:25, and they need to hurry. The world is ending tonight, after all. Guren asks exactly what is going on, and Mahiru just shrugs. The seraph of the end. Divine punishment. Then she walks over to where Guren had abandoned his sword, greeting Noya like an old friend. Then she plunges it into her chest. Guren rushes to her side. Why? Why must she die now? She says her death was inevitable, predetermined since before she was born. There was nothing they could do. But Guren's presence here was a variant, something Mahiru herself had set up, to embrace the weakness in him and choose another path. When you try to revive people, the seraph of the end begins. Revival. Guren's friends. She says revival is only possible with a blood soaked in blood, that of a demon, a human, and a vampire noble. Mahiru coughs up blood, her body beginning to turn black. Then Noya's blade starts to suck into Mahiru's body. Guren begs him to stop, but Noya says it's not him doing it. He's the one being dragged in, to turn Mahiru into a demon. Then her body disappears into the blade, and all that's left behind is the shiny black steel of Noya's katana. He calls for Mahiru. Silence. Noya? Silence. He's all alone now. He looks over at the corpses in the caskets. People he didn't know. Revival. He pulls the people out of the boxes, replacing them with his friends' bodies and severed heads. Then he picks up Shinya, muttering about how pissed he would be Guren is breaking his promise. He carefully lowers him into the last coffin. Ahead there is a slot for a sword. Guren walks up to it, gripping Noya and Mahiru's blade. He now had to make his choice. Embrace weakness or choose the correct path. From behind, he sees Ferid Bathory watching him from the entrance, a smug grin over his face. Please, he begs the vampire, kill me. I want to do the right thing. Ferid just laughs at him. No, this is a choice Guren has to make. Tick-tock. The world draws ever closer, mere minutes away from its demise. Tick-tock. Guren plunges the blade into the slot. I understand. This is my sin. And that's the end of Guren Ichinose Catastrophe at 16. I hope you enjoyed my recap of this series. If you want to experience the whole thing, I suggest picking up the novel series or checking out the manga for it if you're not a huge novel reader. This video was a long time in the making, and I super appreciate the patience from everyone who waited for the final release, especially my Patreons who help fund my creative work. If you want to see more of what I do, be it videos, art, writing, feel free to check out my Patreon for some exclusive works and early access to everything. I appreciate any and all support on my works. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. This is Ash, signing out.